Hi everyone, I just want to preface this video by noting that this video is not a hit piece or an attack video. I actively like the creator I'm going to be talking about. It's just that a decent amount of misinformation has come from this creator's videos. I don't believe this was intentional, and all this video is doing is correcting this misinformation for her audience and providing positive feedback to that creator, which I hope is taken constructively, whilst also airing a few minor grievances that I have with things this person has said and their content. But I do like this creator. This is not intended with any kind of mean-spiritedness, and you should actually check out this creator's most recent video on what kind of animal Godzilla is after you've seen this video. Anyway, on to this video.
Hey everyone! Today I want to talk about a large content creator whose work I like, who has recently unintentionally spread so much misinformation which kinda ended up snowballing into a seemingly unending avalanche of mistakes, and I need to talk about this maturely, or at least try to. I have a lot in common with this content creator, and I think that makes me one of the best people to talk about this, hopefully without making things worse. Hopefully. This is a response video, not a debunk video, and it is certainly not an attack video, even though I am undoubtedly extremely pedantic in this script. So who am I talking about? Well, if you haven't already guessed, we're going to be talking about Irae, who is an actively publishing, PhD-holding paleontologist, like me, who does paleontology psycho, like me, and who does cosplay, like me. We're also both the kind of people who get paid to be naked, since she's an OF star and I'm an art model. I am not going to be presenting this video naked. So why am I responding to Irae? Well, everything started when she posted this silly reel using the Irae lizard meme.
Lizard, 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 lizard. Lizard.
Did you see the problem? Well, not only does the reel call pterosaurs lizards, but she outright explicitly states in the caption that pterosaurs were more closely related to lizards than to dinosaurs. This shocked and confused me, since I, up to this point, was of the impression that pterosaurs were archosaurs, that being the lineage of reptiles which includes the most recent common ancestor of birds and crocodilians and all of that common ancestor's descendants. And I was certain that I had heard that pterosaurs were specifically a member of the clade Avimetatarsalia, that being the lineage which includes dinosaurs and their closest relatives. I mean, they have that fenestra or hole in front of the eyes that's very typical of archosaurs. Meanwhile, the lizards are off on a completely different branch of the reptile family tree, that being the Lepidosauria. So that was my base knowledge, but because of this reel, I had a quick Wikipedia search, and the Wikipedia search agreed with what I had already thought. So I thought, wait, is this coming from some new study that's just been published, which has shaken up the fundamental taxonomy of pterosaurs? So I searched on Google Scholar for papers published since 2024 using the phrase pterosaur taxonomy, and I couldn't find anything. The most recent study I could find was Robert Smith's PhD thesis, and that also calls them archosaurs, indicating that they definitely aren't more closely related to lizards than to dinosaurs. So then I checked with my good friend, the wonderful pterosaur expert and amazing person, Skye McDavid, and she confirmed that, yep, they're still considered archosaurs, and that the idea that pterosaurs are more closely related from lizards comes from the extremely infamous pseudoscientist David Peters. So Irae made a mistake, and that's fine. I'm sure she just owned up to that mistake in the comments or in another reel and everything was fine. Oh no! My friend and wonderful science communicator Astrid Lundberg commented to point out Raesica's mistake, to which Raesica responded by claiming that Archosaurs includes reptiles and that Mosasaurs are most closely related to sea snakes. And no, both of these claims are wildly wrong. Archosaurs are a subset of reptile, not the other way around, which, as we said earlier, comprise the most recent common ancestor of birds and crocodilians and that common ancestor's descendants. Meanwhile, mosasaurs are toxicophorans, which is the group of squamate lizards that contains snakes, monitor lizards, beaded lizards, and while their exact placement in that group is unknown, they were not within the group that includes all modern snakes and their most recent common ancestor, and sea snakes only diverged from other elapid venomous snakes in the last 5-ish million years, being a subset of the Elapidae family. If Mosasaurus were most closely related to sea snakes among modern reptiles, as Raesica says, then mosasaurs would have to be a part of the Elapidae family. But, as discussed in this amazing review of the Elapidae family by Hussam Zahar and colleagues, which I've linked in the description, the oldest fossils of elapids of any kind are 25 million years old. All molecular clock analyses and phylogenetic studies and the fossil record indicate that the elapid group first evolved and diversified during the Oligocene, well after the extinction of the mosasaurs 66 million years ago. So no, mosasaurs objectively were not closely related to sea snakes. And they were no more closely related to sea snakes than they were to any other snake. Now, the comments understandably got inundated with people correcting Raesica about her mistake regarding pterosaurs. So Raesica responded to what was mostly people constructively criticizing her in an interesting way. First, she said, "They're more closely related to reptiles, chill your balls." And what does that mean? Dinosaurs and pterosaurs are both reptiles. They aren't related to reptiles, they are reptiles. If you're saying that they're more closely related to other reptiles than to dinosaurs, then say which reptiles. Otherwise, you're not telling your viewers anything other than what's basically common sense. Like, of course a reptile is most closely related to other reptiles. That's how evolution works. Otherwise it wouldn't be a reptile. But she didn't say the word other, she just said reptiles. So people jumped on her about this too. And she justified her claims about pterosaur ancestry by saying that their phylogenies are not well worked out before telling her critics that they don't know the real literature like she does because she's actually a paleontologist, as though to argue from authority, despite the fact that no peer-reviewed papers have ever justified her claims about pterosaurs being closely related to lizards. When the account Eli here mentioned that Astrid Lundberg had disagreed with her, Raesica claimed that Astrid is not a paleontologist, but an elementary school teacher turned content creator. And I'm sorry, but if you are insinuating that one of my smartest online friends is not worth listening to, especially given Astrid's extensive fieldwork in paleontology, then that is frankly cruel and insulting to one of the brightest minds in SciComm right now. Now, everything I've said thus far might seem like I'm being incredibly pedantic, and maybe I am, but her next claim was wild. Like, flat up wild, especially since Raesica specializes in bird evolution as her research topic. She said, and I quote, "Some dinosaurs are reptiles and some of them are birds." No? All dinosaurs are reptiles, including birds, because the most recent common ancestor of all modern animals that we consider reptiles, that being the lepidosaurs, the turtles, and the crocodilians, and all of that ancestor's descendants, including dinosaurs, which includes birds, make up a single monophyletic group. One of the first things you learn when studying taxonomy is that you can't evolve out of a clade. Reisuka even followed this up with another reel in which she said, again, many dinosaurs are reptiles, but some evolved into birds. Again, completely ignoring basic taxonomy and once again disregarding that you can't evolve out of a clade. All dinosaurs, including birds, irrespective of traditional Linnaean taxonomy, are reptiles. Anyway, with all of these mistakes and people incorrectly doubting her credentials because of the sheer number of quite bad mistakes she was making, Reisuka responded, sensibly.
I'm a paleontologist with a PhD, and the fact that I just posted a dinosaur meme saying that pterosaurs are more closely related to reptiles than they are to dinosaurs because they are flying reptiles, they aren't dinosaurs, and I'm a paleontologist with a PhD who spent 11 years after high school getting a degree and doing a postdoc, and I still do research in paleontology. Yeah, I just posted a paleontology meme, and what do I get? Not a bunch of people saying, oh, that's so cool, pterosaurs, I didn't know that. Thank you, Miss Paleontology Lady. Thank you, Dino Mommy. No, I get a bunch of dudes coming on here saying, I claim to be a paleontologist, but how could I not know that I'm wrong? That must destroy all of my credentials. By the way, I'm not wrong. You don't have access to the latest literature. You don't have any degrees. Who the do you think you are? I'm pretty sure it's just because I was born with a hole instead of a stick. So you think you could come on here and bully me and tell me I'm not a fucking scientist? Well, fuck you!
So, she argued from authority, said that her critics didn't have access to the latest literature, even though the latest literature did not agree with her claims at all, lied about what she had said by pretending that she was saying that they were more closely related to reptiles when she actually specifically said lizards, then baselessly claimed that everyone who called her out for accidentally spreading misinformation was doing so out of sexism. But then we need to talk about her response to friend of the channel Max, aka Notorious Naturalist. Now, Notorious Naturalist gave a pretty comprehensive response about the incorrect nature of her many claims up to this point, to which she responded to his question about whether or not she was confusing pterosaurs with mosasaurs, saying that they were closely related to lizards, by telling him that she had published on mosasaurs.
Greetings, Earthlings. It is I, Nibbles the Cat. I interrupt this video to apologize because Diana made a cataclysmic screw-up. She had absolutely no idea that Reisuka's identity was supposed to be kept secret. So, every time that she references things that could potentially dox Reisuka, such as Reisuka's real name and publication record, as well as other people who would perhaps best be not named for the sake of avoiding harassment, I have decided to replace them with pictures of my wonderful cat self, and with graceful meow sound effects.
She also told Astrid that she had worked on mosasaurs in the past, which is weird because both Max and myself coincidentally looked through her ORCID and ResearchGate pages, and we literally only found evidence for her working on birds, not on mosasaurs. So I asked my good friend and mosasaur specialist, and he confirmed that Reisuka is a co-author on a paper about a which the paper argues might be from a mosasaur, but might not. We don't actually know what this is from, and one of the people I spoke to about it said that's definitely not a mosasaur. And that is the sole extent of Reisuka's alleged mosasaur research. But saying that you've published on mosasaurs because you've published on one mystery that might or might not be from a mosasaur kind of feels like a massive stretch and borderline dishonest. But hey, mosasaurs aren't the only thing that is erroneously talked about the relationships of when it comes to snakes, which we'll get to in a bit. First, let's go to her latest video, and oh my gosh, that's an AI-generated thumbnail that puts a Stegosaurus astagomizer on the very top of its tail! But hey, Requiem is a paleontologist who cares about accurate science communication. After all, she constantly brags to her audience about having access to the latest literature and having a PhD. She wouldn't put a woefully inaccurate representation of a well-known animal on her thumbnail like that. Right? Like, this has to be some other kind of stegosaurid, right? Well, I couldn't find any stegosaurs like this, and no one I asked could think of any stegosaurs that could conceivably be like this. So, excluding the fact that there are no stegosaurs we know of that look like that, let's jump into the episode, and oh
Hey
no!
guys, so if you didn't know already what this video is about, you probably know
so
now.
we have an AI-generated Theropod whose arms keep changing in terms of their number of fingers, and which briefly grows another arm, and which has no eyes and just deep pits in its face. Presuka, you bragged in your comments about basing your videos on the most recent up-to-date science. What papers claim that theropods had weird morphing arms that fluctuate by the second in terms of the number of fingers they have and which spontaneously grow arms sometimes? There is never, and I mean never, any valid excuse for using AI art in science communication, as it cannot accurately represent the animals that you are talking about. And since many paleo artists, myself included, would have been happy to work with you, and there's plenty of art that you can easily find online. This is absurd. Generative AI has an enormous carbon footprint and water usage issue and is entirely driven by plagiarism. But hey, that's just the thumbnail and the video's opening. She's a paleontologist after all. I'm sure everything else in this video is gonna be great, right? Right? Before we get to the video, I'm also going to point out that Requiem has previously generated this paleontologically inaccurate thumbnail for a prior video. And in it, neither of these supposed Brachiosaurus have even remotely Brachiosaurus-like skulls, with one of them having an Allosaurus head. We'll skip past a fair bit here because a lot of it is accurate, and then we'll skip to the part where she's talking about Allosaurus, because Requiem makes some really bizarre claims here.
To birds. They're actually the group of dinosaurs that evolved into living birds, which are living dinosaurs. So we can tell that Allosaurus is a theropod not only by the shape of his teeth, but also by the shape of the sinuses in his skull. So you can see that the holes in his skull are pretty wide, right? They're pretty much taking up a lot of air in his skull. And that's because these dinosaurs, again, were closely related to birds and evolved into them, and birds have hollow bones. And some theropods, like Velociraptor, even did too. So it makes sense that they would have these big sinus holes in their skull to start to kind of hollow the skull out and make it lighter.
Okay, what? Did she just say that Allosaurus had large fenestrae in its skulls because it's related to birds? Like, it's very distantly related to birds and not part of the line of theropods that would go to evolve into birds, and being related to birds does not mean that they were lightening their bodies to be adapted to a more bird-like lifestyle. These animals could not fly, they had no adaptations towards flight, and they wanted light skeletons for the sake of chasing down large prey. But hey, it's not like Requiem believes that large theropods are ancestral to birds, right? I mean, she's a postdoctoral researcher who focuses on bird evolution. She certainly hasn't made videos directly listing dinosaurs who lived long after the evolution of birds as ancestors of birds, right? And she certainly hasn't listed T-Rex as an ancestor of birds, right?
Specifically, I study how dinosaurs like Velociraptor and T-Rex evolved into living dinosaurs, which are the birds of today.
Here's the thing. I get that she says dinosaurs like, but the implication that she's leading her audience towards here, albeit unintentionally, is that birds are a polyphyletic group with respect to Theropoda, with multiple convergent ancestral lineages, as opposed to being a monophyletic group, which they are. I understand her saying dinosaurs like Velociraptor, since dromaeosaurs are obviously very closely related to birds. But saying that T-Rex as well was like one of the ancestors to birds, when one of the most pervasive myths in the public perception of dinosaurs is that T-Rex evolved into chickens, really feels like Reisika is going out of her way to validate that myth, and that is just deeply irresponsible. But anyway, back to the video.
Look at this massive Triceratops skull over here. Now, this is something that's been showcased in the museum, but it's not something that we would just go out into the field and break open a rock and the skull is going to pop out. This would take months of digging and carefully piecing together different parts of the Triceratops skull. But something you might not know is that museums actually put these things together, not just using a lot of time and experts and machines to put them together, but they also sometimes use casts to try to fill out like areas of the dinosaur.
Oh god, no. She just used another AI generated video, this time of Triceratops, and do you see the problem with it? This is an animation of a large, mature animal being shown here, but it still has its epoccipitals, that being these triangular bones running around the edge of the frill. The problem is that these epoccipitals fuse into the frill as the animal matures. So, Reisika just showed an animal with a juvenile's frill, and I can say juvenile, not subadult, because those epoccipitals are very narrow and pointed. Instead of showing paleoart of the animal to her audience, Reisika uses AI, which perpetuates misinformation about the appearance of the animal she's talking about. Triceratops is one of the easiest animals to find paleoart for. It is bizarre that she is doing this. Now we're going to skip ahead and talk about Plesiosaurus, because most of this section is good, and she gives a great discussion of the fact that this animal was pregnant and has a baby skeleton within its own, as well as about the fact that these animals ate gastroliths and why. But then she says this.
What's crazy about Plesiosaurus is it actually was not a dinosaur. It's more closely related to snakes and reptiles.
What? So, according to you, Plesiosaurus was more closely related to snakes and reptiles than dinosaurs. What do you mean, and reptiles? Of course they are related to other reptiles, they are reptiles. Saying something that is related to reptiles and that is more closely related to reptiles than dinosaurs is implying that both dinosaurs and plesiosaurs aren't reptiles. But let's review the first part of this statement. Are plesiosaurs more closely related to snakes than dinosaurs? And are they even that closely related to snakes at all? Well, considering that snakes are derived toxicophoran squamates and plesiosaurs aren't even squamates at all, the obvious answer is no. But hey, are plesiosaurs more closely related to snakes or squamates more broadly than they are to dinosaurs? If so, hooray! This isn't a terrible statement. If not, then she just spread misinformation, presumably because given the snake connection, she probably confused plesiosaurs with mosasaurs. So let's investigate. Now, plesiosaurs belong to a broader group of marine reptiles called the Sauropterygia, which also includes nothosaurs, placodonts, pachypleurosaurs, pistosaurs, and saurosphagids. But where do Sauropterygians lie in the reptile family tree? Well, we don't really know. The group appeared in the Middle Triassic period, and the Triassic is a time infamous for weird evolutionary mysteries as far as reptile evolution goes. Some studies, like this one from 2013, have found them to be in the group that includes modern turtles. And this 2015 study argued that they are the sister lineage to turtles. But not all phylogenetic studies have found them to be closely related to turtles. For example, this one from 2022 found them to belong to the Archosauromorpha, which would most definitely make them more closely related to dinosaurs than to turtles. But as I've said, the taxonomy of the Sauropterygia as it relates to other groups is a mess right now. The most recent study, as I just said, places the group as more closely related to dinosaurs than snakes, but maybe Reisica was going off of the earlier studies. If she was, why would she list snakes as their modern relative and not turtles, which seem to be more likely to be more closely related to them, unless they were archosauromorphs, than snakes?
Hey, what's up? I need your help. Can you come here? I can't. I'm buying...
Plesiosaur.
Alright, well, hurry up and come over here. I can't find them. What do you mean you can't find them? I can't find them. There's only...
Squamate.
What do you mean there's only...
Squamate.
It means there's only...
Squamate.
Well, then get out of this...
Squamate.
Bile! Alright, you don't have to shout at me! There's more...
Squamate.
What do you mean there's more...
Squamate.
There's just more...
Squamate.
Going to the next aisle! There's still...
Squamate.
Where are you right now? I'm at...
Squamate.
What do you mean you're at...
Squamate.
I mean I'm at...
Squamate.
What store are you in? I'm at the...
Squamate.
Store! Why are you buying...
Sauropterygia.
at this...
Squamate.
store? Fuck you!
Later on in this video, she makes claims about Stegosaurus's plates primarily being a thermoregulatory feature. Honestly, this is a complicated discussion that a lot of research has been done on. They likely had multiple functions, including display and potentially thermoregulation, but I feel like I need to do more reading into this, so I'm going to say this is all okay. And now we need to talk about a brand new reel. This is brand new Reisica content that she posted 3 days ago at the time of this recording. 3 days ago, in 2025. Bear that in mind with what she's about to talk about.
Breaking paleo news. A new fossil was discovered and it was the heaviest mammal that ever lived.
Oh my gosh, breaking paleo news! I can't wait to find out about the biggest mammal ever that has just been discovered so recently that it was breaking news 3 days ago.
I'm the cosplaying Pils here to tell you more about Perucetus colossus.
Wait, what? The Perucetus? The animal that was described 2 years ago in 2023? That's breaking news now?
The name literally means colossal whale of Peru, and it's a very fitting name. Estimates show that this animal weighed 200 tons. This means that it outweighs the heaviest animal that ever lived, Bruchacchiosaurus, by 30 metric tons in its highest weight estimation.
Wait. She's talking about its biggest size estimation as though 2 separate studies haven't both come out that found major issues with the original study describing Perucetus' size estimates and downsized it since then. Is she going to talk about those studies, or is she going to act like they didn't happen?
If you've seen my previous video about how titanosaurs use air sacs to get so huge, you probably know by now that blue whales use the buoyancy of the water to counteract having such a heavy body, and Perucetus uses this strategy to the extreme. Perucetus have really dense and compact bones. This allowed them to sink on shallow coasts and use their tiny arms and legs to do a little underwater walk. However, this would actually crush the animal due to the pressure. So to counteract this, they would have a huge amount of soft tissue, especially fat. This huge amount of fat and soft tissue would allow them to lower their density and increase their buoyancy, allowing them to counteract their weight. That's why their reconstruction showed them so chonky. Paleontologists could tell that the Perucetus fossil they found was a juvenile because the ends of each vertebrae in the spine were not completely fused. Because of this, we still don't know how this animal fed or whether 20 meters long was actually its full length.
Wait, she's saying 20 meters was the length of the animal, despite the most recent study by Paul and Laramendi estimating that it was more likely only around 15 to 16 meters long?
Keep in mind that this is actually smaller than the blue whale, which is 30 meters long, and smaller than Brachiosaurus, which had an impressive 47 meters in some estimates. Suck on that, mammals. The dinos are still winning in size.
But wait, what is she talking about when it comes to the size of Brachiosaurus, and that being the heaviest animal ever? I was under the impression up to now that the heaviest animal ever was the blue whale. Fortunately, this is where Raceca doesn't seem all that far off. It just seems like it's kind of up in the air, so people go with the blue whale as the most likely. Brachiosaurus is a contender for the largest animal ever, but given how fragmentary these animals are, it's kind of hard to be confident on this, especially since according to Paul and Larramendi in this other paper they wrote, femur to tibia length based estimates for sauropod mass estimates have a tendency to lead to mass overestimates. And the bones that we use to estimate this large size for Brachiosaurus are, according to this paper, now lost. In any case though, Raceca presented 2-year-old research which has been argued against by multiple other studies regarding Perucetus' size and length as though it was brand new, and seemingly only read the description of the animal and ignored the multiple subsequent works disputing the size and mass estimates in its description. At the very least, these should be given a mention when you are uncritically claiming that this was definitively the heaviest animal ever. My conclusion really is that Raceca doesn't really seem to do much research, if any, before she makes videos.
Okay, so quick editing note. Turns out I was actually wildly wrong here. I can confirm actually that some of her recent videos, especially her video on what kind of animal Godzilla would have been, are actually really good and clearly were well researched. I think the issue really lies with the OFTV content and a lot of the shorts that are made off the cuff. I also want to note that when it comes to the Perucetus short and a few of the other shorts that I originally was going to respond to in this video, which had wildly outdated information in, that, as it turns out, comes from the fact that a lot of these shorts are actually 2 or 3 years old and have been re-uploaded recently. Now, I should have noticed this from the fact that she is blatantly missing arm tattoos that are present in recent videos, and I feel a bit stupid for not noticing that, so I want to point that out before anyone else does. I am now aware of this. That said, I do think that if you're going to re-upload old content, it should be so that you can update it with newer information, rather than just reiterating now outdated information, as in the Perucetus video that we just watched. I also think that if you're going to re-upload old content, you should make sure that you add in a note that this is old and that some of the stuff in it might be outdated now. Anyway, back to the video.
It all seems to be off the top of the dome things that she's read about the animals she's talking about potentially years earlier, with no evidence that she's delved into the recent literature at all on the groups she's talking about.
This problem specifically relates to the museum video, which we were talking about, which was the recent OFTV video. And I think that we really need to bring up the fact that because this was a museum video, it kind of had to be off the cuff. So I think that the issues with this video could have been resolved by, taking some time after she's filmed it to fact check everything that she'd said, and maybe to have filmed a lot of B-roll at the museum so that when editing, she could add in the stuff that she'd fact-checked and corrected in the form of narrations.
The fact that she continues to argue from authority while making basic mistakes and talking down to other science communicators, even arguing that Astrid Lundberg, who is an amazing person, isn't worth listening to, is frankly outrageous and irresponsible behavior. And the fact that she uses AI is really bizarre to me. I want to make it clear though that I do like Raceca and her content, but it's going in a direction that, in my opinion, really needs to be corrected. I doubt she'll see this video, but if you do, I just want to say that please keep making SciComm content. You are good at it. But also, please take time to research the topics that you talk about in depth before covering them. And remember that having a PhD does not make us infallible. Someone could easily make a video similar to the one I'm making about you, about myself, because I've made plenty of mistakes in my videos, including some pretty darn glaring ones. But whenever that happens, I pin a comment correcting my mistake and I acknowledge it. And I can honestly say that I am very happy that I've cultivated an audience of people who fact check what I say and don't take my words as the gospel. I don't accuse everyone who points out my mistakes constructively as being part of a sexist hate brigade. I get that you had a lot of backlash, which must have been hard as a large content creator getting all of those negative notifications. And I can see that you might just see this video as part of that hate campaign, but honestly, I am not trying to hate on you. I like your content, and Lord knows I know what it's like to be harassed online, especially since coming out as trans. I think if you took more time to research before making videos, didn't jump to conclusions about people who criticize you, and stopped with the AI usage, the amount of people being argumentative in your comments would go down. But like, to anyone who is being sexist to Reiska, and there are people who are, genuinely, go fuck yourself. Oh, and also, Reiska, given your Mosasaur, Plesiosaur, and Pterosaur taxonomies, if you are getting your taxonomy from David Peters, please don't.
What store are you in? I'm at the
Elapid.
store! Why are you buying
Mosasaurs.
at this
Elapid.
store? Fuck you!
In any case, I'm Dr. Diana King, and what the hell am I wearing? Huge shout out goes to my wonderful Patreon supporters, especially my wonderful 4-hour tier supporters, Aries, Geneva, and Tiles. And a huge shout out to my delightful Dilophosaurus tier supporters, Futurebird and Hours. Thank you also very much to my wonderful Radiolarian tier supporters, Glenn Collins, Rowie Arting, and John and Eric Feenstra. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening, and thank you for watching. I'm not 100% sure what the next video is going to be. I have way too many ideas, and too little time. We'll see. But I know which one my Patreon supporters voted for, so it's probably going to be that.